Please subscribe, like, and share. It really helps us out. And of course, if you have any questions, comment below, and we will answer you as soon as we can. Welcome to this video in our series on A-level economics. Topics covered today are as follows. 2.6, Macroeconomic Objectives and Policies, Part 3. This is the final part of 2.6 and covers supply-side policies. If you haven't seen our previous videos, click on the card above.
Let's start out today by looking at supply-side policies. Supply-side policies are government policies aimed at increasing the productive potential of the economy and moving the supply curve to the right. Over time, there tend to be supply-side improvements independent of the government, through actions of the private sector such as investment. However, the government is able to use supply-side policies in order to increase and speed up these improvements. They may be across the whole economy or in certain markets to target economic growth in that sector. They are widely classed into market-based and interventionist methods. Market-based policies are policies that are designed to remove anything that prevents the free market system from working efficiently, causing lower output and higher prices. These barriers include those which reduce the willingness of workers to take jobs or lead to inefficient production, high prices, or a lack of risk-taking. Interventionist policies are policies designed to correct market failure. For example, the free market underprovides education, and so the government provides it. Also, firms may only look into the short term and look to maximize short-run profits to give to shareholders instead of investing, so governments may take actions to encourage investment. Free market economists tend to argue for market-based policies as they want the government to have as small a role as possible. Economists who support interventionist policies suggest the free market is not as efficient as people believe, and so the government needs to intervene to improve it.
So, let's look at the different kinds of policies. Firstly, increase incentives. By increasing the incentive for people to go to work or firms to employ people, the government will increase the size of the workforce, and this would mean more goods and services would be produced. A reduction in benefits/taxes will increase the opportunity cost of being out of work and mean that people are always better off within work than on benefits. This is why the government has introduced universal credit, which helps to ease the transition into and out of work. A reduction in benefits may prevent the poverty or unemployment trap, where low-income workers end up in the same or an even worse position after they gain a new job because of the benefits they lose. The unemployment or poverty trap can also be solved by subsidizing workers. For example, lower-income workers receive income tax credits instead of paying income tax. Moreover, they could encourage parts of the workforce back to work. For example, women could be offered free childcare and flexible hours. Taxes on firms when they take on new staff, such as national insurance contributions, decrease the incentive for businesses to employ. Reducing these taxes would increase incentives for firms to employ. A reduction or removal of the minimum wage would increase the incentive for firms to employ. Moreover, they could increase incentives for people to take risks or for firms to invest. One way they could do this would be lowering taxes, which will mean people see a bigger return on their investment. The problem with this method is that many people will argue a small change in any tax, for example from 25% to 20%, will have little impact on people's incentive to work. Reductions of tax on high-income earners will lead to more income inequality, and any reduction will mean governments have less revenue, so have to decrease spending or borrow more. Reducing benefits will also worsen equality.
Now let's look at promoting competition. Firstly, privatization. This is selling nationalized companies to private sectors, or deregulation, reducing restriction on businesses which restrict entry to the market, makes firms more competitive. Next, competition policies. These are used to prevent monopolies in the market and make cartels and price-fixing agreements illegal. The CMA is the body in the UK which ensures markets are competitive, and the Competition Act, 1998, and Enterprise Act, 2002, were passed with the same aim. The belief is that competition is necessary to make firms efficient, as they have to offer a cheaper or better service if there is competition. Free market economists argue that governments have little incentive to cut costs or innovate, so nationalized industries are inefficient and cause government failure. However, deregulation and privatization may lead to poorer quality service. It could also cause environmental issues if deregulation is seen in environmental regulations.
Now let's look at reforming the labor market. By increasing the retirement age, there will be more people working, and so more goods and services could be produced. Moreover, the labor market could become more flexible in order to make it more efficient, as it can respond to external changes, such as changes in demand for a product or population changes. One way to do this is through the weakening of unions. For example, the government has introduced postal ballots, banned secondary picketing, and reduced the picket line to only 7 people. Unions now have to give 14 days notice before strikes and have a higher turnout in support for strikes in ballots. Trade unions push up wages, which can lead to businesses laying off some workers and reducing production, which limits aggregate supply, and so, therefore, reducing their power will hope to prevent this. Also, businesses have attempted to be more flexible by changing employment contracts, for example, zero-hour contracts. Flexibility could also be in the form of making it easier to change jobs, through higher mobility of labor. Improved information about job vacancies, improved flexibility of pensions, and improved geographical mobility, or in making it easier to sack people from jobs, which would encourage more firms to employ people. In order to improve geographical mobility, the government is trying to improve the affordability of housing. To do this, they have cut VAT and relaxed planning laws. If the minimum wage is set above the equilibrium level, it will cause increased unemployment, so some people argue the minimum wage should be scrapped to prevent real wage inflexibility unemployment. The reduction of benefits will also increase the incentive to work and help to reform the labor market. Universal credit is helping to reform the labor market, although it is currently experiencing problems in setting it up. On the whole, all of these methods would reduce unemployment, which represents a waste of resources, and mean that more goods and services can be produced as the labor force is bigger. On the other hand, trade unions are already very weak in the UK, so reducing their power further may have little effect. Similarly, reducing benefits will lower aggregate demand if these people are unable to get jobs, and this will cause a further fall in employment. The reduction in benefits is likely to have a multiplier effect, as the poor have a very high marginal propensity to consume, and so a reduction in their income will cause a large fall in spending, meaning aggregate demand falls by a lot. It may also mean there is increased income inequality. Making the labor force more flexible will lead to decreased quality of life, as people are less secure in their jobs and may have to work odd hours. It will also mean some people receive very low pay, which will increase income inequality and may reduce aggregate demand. How about improvements to the skills and quality of the labor force? They could increase spending on education and training to create a more educated workforce who will be more efficient and be able to do more skilled jobs, increasing the number of goods and services produced. This could be in terms of academic education, such as free university tuition, more spending on secondary school, or improving the quality of on-the-job training, such as apprenticeships. T-levels have been introduced by the government as an A-level equivalent that focuses on technical education. The government is also working with trade unions and firms to improve the skills of the long-term unemployed. Alternatively, they could introduce regulation which forces businesses to continuously train their own staff, to keep them up with developments. The apprenticeship levy is effectively a tax on salaries in large companies where the money is held online for them to spend on training. However, it has not been very effective, as there has been a fall in the quality and number of apprenticeships. An increase in high-skilled migrants would also improve the quality of the workforce. The government has introduced more lax rules for skilled immigration. It is hoped this will improve the skills shortages in the UK, where there are 800,000 unfilled vacancies due to incorrect skills. Overall, improvements in skills will mean that workers are more efficient and so can produce more goods and services, as well as being more skilled, so be able to develop new technology. However, improving education may have no effect if it is on skills not relevant to the workforce. Increasing education will incur an opportunity cost, as it means government money will be lost in other sectors. It will also take time to see the effects of increased education, and more investment may not necessarily increase the quality of education.
Now, let's move on to looking at improving infrastructure. This could be done by offering tax incentives or subsidies on investment. For example, businesses that invest their profits could see lower tax rates. Investment in the UK is just 17% of GDP compared to 35% in South Korea. In order to improve this, the government plans to reduce corporation tax to 18% in 2020. Moreover, the Enterprise Investment Scheme provides tax relief for people who buy shares in a small company when the finance raised is used for investment purposes. Alternatively, the government could spend money to improve infrastructure themselves. Some government action includes building new roads, HS2, Crossrail, and the Transforming Cities Fund. This will mean new technology will be developed and more will be invested in buying new technology. Improvements in technology will mean that production is more efficient, so fewer resources are needed to produce the same amount of goods, whilst more technology will mean more goods and services can be produced. The UK is 24th in the world for infrastructure, and so it is clear that more action needs to be taken. However, there are some issues. Offering tax breaks/subsidies could have adverse effects on the government budget, as it will mean they lose tax revenue or incur an opportunity cost as they have to spend money on subsidies. Some businesses may not actually invest this money and instead used it as a method of tax evasion. Moreover, not all investments will be successful in improving supply, as they may not achieve their aim, or it may not be aimed at increasing supply.
Okay, let's evaluate supply-side policies. Unlike demand-side policies, supply-side policies are able to both increase output and decrease prices. They are more long-term policies and lead to long-term economic growth, rather than small changes in economic growth following changes in aggregate demand. Moreover, they can be directed at increasing exports, which will also improve the balance of payments. Supply-side policies allow two different types of approaches: market-based and interventionist, and this will mean that both free market economists and more interventionist economists will accept and use supply-side policies. However, the Keynesian long-run aggregate supply curve shows that they have no impact when long-run aggregate supply is elastic, and so demand-side policies are needed to fix the problem in the short run. Moreover, not all supply-side policies work at actually increasing supply, whilst others cause conflicts, and both these issues vary depending on which policies are used. Often, the government has to spend more money, for example on education, or decrease taxes, which will decrease their revenue and lead to a budget deficit. These actions may also have undesirable impacts on aggregate demand and could cause higher unemployment or higher inflation. Supply-side policies can also take a long time to have any effect on output, and this makes them less useful. Some of these policies are aimed at solving microeconomic issues, for example, underperforming monopolies, in order to improve a macroeconomic concept. If the economy is not successful at a microeconomic level, it will be unable to meet macroeconomic objectives.
So, what are the conflicts and trade-offs between objectives and policies? There are many different trade-offs between the macroeconomic objectives. Two objectives that tend to go hand in hand are economic growth and unemployment, but the rest tend to be achieved at the expense of another. Firstly, economic growth versus protection of the environment. As the economy grows, we expect more resources to be used. As we use resources and produce goods, we produce pollution and noise and destroy habitats. Economic growth in China has been rapid, but it has led to serious levels of pollution. Economic growth can be achieved without damaging the environment, but the growth is likely to be slower and has higher costs. Secondly, economic growth versus balance of payments. Some countries such as India have seen rapid economic growth leading to a balance of payments problems. The country is so large that its industry is largely producing goods for its own people, and the wealth of the people has led to increased demand for imported goods. In comparison, China has seen massive growth, but that has been largely by producing goods for exports, and therefore their balance of payments is in a surplus. How about unemployment versus inflation? Introducing the short-run Phillips curve. A.W. Phillips found a trade-off between inflation and unemployment, called the Phillips curve. He found the existence of an empirical regularity, which said that the rate of change in money wages increased as the rate of unemployment fell. This was then generalized into a relationship between unemployment and inflation, by arguing that firms pass on increases in wages to the customer and increased prices. The reason for this connection is that businesses know that if there is a high level of unemployment, they can attract the workers they want with low wages. If there is high employment, firms are competing for the best workers, and the way to obtain the best is by offering higher wages. Initially, the Phillips curve seemed to accurately show the relationship well. However, during the 1970s, we saw high levels of unemployment and low inflation, called stagflation.
There are also conflicts and trade-offs between policies. Firstly, conflicts between expansionary and deflationary fiscal and monetary policies. Expansionary policies will increase aggregate demand, to increase output, employment, and economic growth, but will lead to increased inflation and may worsen the balance of payments as some of the increased demand for goods and services will be met by imports. On the other hand, deflationary policies will decrease aggregate demand to improve inflation, but will decrease employment and economic growth. Next, changes in interest rates. An increase in interest rates will be used to decrease inflation. However, continuously high rates will damage long-term investment as fewer businesses will want to invest, and this will decrease long-term growth. Moreover, they will raise the value of the pound, which will decrease exports and increase imports, worsening the balance of payments. Also, the interest rate will affect the distribution of wealth. High interest rates benefit savers and lenders, tending to be older people as they are more likely to have savings. Low interest rates tend to increase income inequality, as the richest people hold a larger proportion of their wealth in non-money assets, such as stocks, shares, and belongings, and so aren't affected much by interest rates, whilst middle and working class people are more likely to have savings in the bank. Next, supply-side policies. Supply-side policies intend to increase aggregate supply, and therefore improve long-term economic growth. They are also able to decrease long-term inflation, but may increase it in the short term if they encourage investment, as this will increase aggregate demand. Moreover, policies that decrease trade union power, reduce wages, lower benefits, and change taxation, may increase income equality, as these will negatively affect the poorest in the country. Some supply-side policies have adverse effects on the budget or on the environment. Finally, fiscal deficits. In order to reduce fiscal deficits, the government may decide to reduce government spending and increase taxes. Firstly, this will reduce aggregate demand and decrease short-term economic growth and higher unemployment. Also, the higher the fall in output as a result of these measures, the higher the fall in tax revenues will be, and so therefore the more ineffective the policy. Moreover, it is likely to affect income equality, as the poor are the ones who use the government services most and so will be worst affected. Some microeconomic policies could have adverse macroeconomic impacts and vice versa. For example, indirect taxes to fix market failure could reduce competitiveness and decrease short-run aggregate supply. Thank you for watching our video. Please like, subscribe and share. And comment below so we can clarify things for you.